Good afternoon. So I'll say that this phrase was borrowed from David Whedon of the Wampanoag, who's part of our projects. But these projects are both honoring ecological integrity and human connections. And so a big part of the project, even when we started, was to have the idea not only to restore the river, but to have a trail along the river that told the history of the river, which is very similar to many rivers all over the Cape. These second graders had a program where I went in and talked about fish migration. The high school teacher, art teacher, worked with the kids, had her students work with these kids to make these fish kites. And this was after the field trip, then they could fly their kites. And they ran around me and they said, "Betsy, we're herring schooling in the sea." They're now sophomores in high school. So we're a little bit to the east, to the west of the last story. And I won't talk too much about fish, but I do have a good picture of Steve and fish from this. Steve also reintroduced brook trout to our system. So the Coonamessett River runs from Coonamessett Pond to Great Pond and about 3 miles long. So our project has a lower river project. We were a priority river with DER for the lower river. Then after we completed the lower river in 2 phases, we moved to the upper river, and we were an upper river priority project. But the project goals were always the same. So it's continuity to establish a healthy, self-sustaining river and wetland ecosystem, connecting the land to the sea. But to increase coastal resiliency, we also not just took down the dams, but we removed the berms in the system. And to increase recreational and educational opportunities. So continuity, connectivity, and connections. So we had about 40 partners for the lower river and an equal number, some of them were quite slightly different, in the upper river. But this was a town of Falmouth project, but this would not have been done without decades of state, local, and national biologists recognizing the importance of this river. And 2 NGOs in Falmouth, the Coonamessett River Trust, which is just a small group of people who got together in the early 2000s, and they were the ones who had to deal with the what's the term I want to use? Sometimes frustrating interaction in the river versus bog story. So a lot of this took place in the first decade of the 2000s. I got involved after that. I got involved when Coonamessett River Trust said to me, "You're on commission, you can write grants, we can write grant money to start working on restoration." And then we got involved. We were a priority river. And I met the guy who was in charge, and I said, "So what's this mean? What's a priority river mean?" And he said, "Well, we can give you a little bit of funding to get started." And he said, and technical support. And I said, "Well, how do we activate that?" And he said, "You have to ask." I said, "Well, consider yourself asked." And the next day he called, and Beth was our project coordinator. Okay, so now north is that way in this picture. The lower river was completed in phase 1 and phase 2 was completed in 2020. The upper river was in 2025. Now the upper parts, somebody else mentioned this, the upper parts of these rivers are known as Dutchman's ditches because they're not continuous streams. And in a really dry period, you just had a series of wetlands that people connected with ditches. And so the project, this upper Coonamessett project, really, you can really see the difference. There's a set point where the river's pretty large, and then above that, it's kind of a trickle, which is kind of a trick for this year. Okay, again, if you heard in the next door and you heard Beth, this is conceptual plans, goals. You have a technical committee, and you engage the public. And in our case, the public heard a lot about cranberry bogs in town meeting, but we also had a number of meetings initially to explain the project, and then once we started getting results, we had public meetings to share them with the public. Okay, this is the lower river. Phase 1 says we finished in 2017. Phase 2, this was a slide from when we were doing this. Construction was actually 2019, 2020. And then, like I said, right from the beginning, I thought this was a good opportunity to have a public trail and public information scenes. And so we have like 14 stations along the river with 1 to 3 signs. And this one is about evolution of the landscape. Here are some people looking at the slides. All times a year, people visit these areas. Okay, so basically, we removed all the water control structures to improve connectivity. We improved wetland diversity from a monoculture, almost a monoculture, to habitat that had 100, well, in the samples, which were meter square plots, 170 species of wetland plants. And these plants, we did a little bit of seeding as a side project, but it turns out almost all of these plants came up from seed that was covered for 200 years underwater when it was dammed up for mills. The first mill in Falmouth was on this river. And then 100 years covered with sand. So they just sprung up. And then we made the river more sinuous and added a lot more habitat. So what I say to people is, we made mosaics of river habitat and mosaics of wetland habitat, which I'll show you how in a minute, which vastly increased the biodiversity. So down near the bottom, you can see a little side stream. Forget the one in the middle, but there's another side stream up above. Part of the design of this project was to tie really strong cold water springs to the main river. And so that Steve Hurley always said, the fish can pass through warmer water. They don't like it, but they need to have these refuges. So one of the techniques is to build these armored bends in the river. And underneath these armored bends, the water can get 3 to 4 feet deep. There's Steve, and those of you who know Steve there are a number of here that I sent this picture to, and they said, we've never seen Steve smile. That I was out there with a Mashpee High School group, and Steve was electrofishing, and this is a 15-inch brook trout, 4 years old, and it had been tagged 2 years before. It went from 150 grams to 300 grams to 600 grams. Okay, this is just to show. Here's one of those. This is one of the side streams, and this is how to make a mosaic of habitat on the wetland surface. If you're going to do a project like this, warn people that it's going to look ugly at one point, but the plants will come back. Okay, we have a lot of volunteers and a lot of volunteer organizations, but this was an effort by, I don't know if I can get it, Mark Kaspersik, who was our land manager for conservation. He got all these different groups, many more than are illustrated here, including the AmeriCorps and Upper Cape Tech, to deal with the invasive gray willow before we started working in the Upper River. So this is the Upper River group, and these are all the tree companies down below who helped with that. Okay, those of you who are coming tomorrow, and I'm assuming some of you will be coming, this is the upper part of the river. We have 5 cells. We didn't call them by their initial name because it would be too difficult to remember. It's the northern upper Baptiste Bog. So Nick Nelson said, let's call them A through E. So now they're A through E. This is the area, Broad River, which has a lot of springs that come in here. It was dammed off, or just it had a water control structure that was just a trickle. The fish couldn't come up here, but the river's big and wide from this point down. This point, you'll see it's a pretty small river. Okay, here's the engineering plans. The yellow is what we excavated, and the green is the fill. This was taken July 2025, and you can see it was all like bombed mud, and you can see it's all revegetated without planting anything, planting a few bushes and a few trees. Somebody said go to be in the spring. Come visit here in the fall. It's spectacular. This is one of our wetland walkways. That mound is a turtle mound. I'm getting there. Whoops. This is across Broad River. So now both herring and trout can use this habitat. We added 4 new signs honoring the Wampanoags. Here's planting one of them. And you heard this morning about the rights of nature. We were inspired in Falmouth, and we now have the select board accepted a rights of nature for Falmouth. The Coonamessett River Trust also works with the school department, and all the 4th graders visit the river for a field trip in the spring, and all the 5th graders come back and do water quality. This is another project with the high school art teacher. It was art students and AP biology students. This is some of their artwork. And we have their artwork all over on the signs as well. And I've probably given 100 field trips, and I have 52 seconds left. I've probably given half some of my time. I've probably given 100 field trips or lectures, This particular one was people from Living Observatory. And when we were planning this project, we met every month. But once you start working, you meet every week. And this is one of our weekly trips, almost at the finish. And that's the finish.
Thank you. Do we have any questions?
Thank you, Betsy. Beautiful photos. Amazing project. My apologies if I missed this, but I'm curious how much the project cost, and also how many staff besides you were working on it for the timeline of the project.
Okay, well, I'm not staff. I was a volunteer for
Okay.
this whole project.
Or volunteers.
But I will tell you that every department in the town of Falmouth did something to help on this project. And the head of DPW gave a presentation, and he said, Betsy's around so much, she's in DPW more than I am. And how much it cost. The Lower River project that included also the trail and the overlook was about $5 million of grant funds, and this upper project about $3.5 million. It's not cheap, but Beth was helpful, and well, it's not that she gave me the money, but she said, hey, you could apply for this grant. Oh, no, you can apply for that one. Fortunately, it came through. It was touch and go. Beth and I had a lot of conversations for the lower project. By the time we got to the upper project, the problem was that all the money came, but as any of you working in this, permitting takes forever.
Is there one more question?
So I had a follow-up question on the cost. So you had to reconstruct a culvert. Was the culvert reconstruction part of that $5 million for the lower Coonamessett? And just how much was that culvert piece?
So, would you like $500,000 for your project? And I'm like, let me think. Yes. So the culvert was a little over $1 million, but there are things that NRCS wouldn't pay for. So, but to give NRCA credit, the part that they would pay for was more than $500,000, and so they gave us that additional money.